My name is Rachel McAllister, and my life collapsed in the time it takes to zip up a suitcase. It was 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. I still remember the exact minute because the coffee machine beeped and I had just poured milk into my daughter's cereal bowl. I walked upstairs, humming, expecting to find my husband Jeremy getting ready for work. Instead, I found him packing. Not for a business trip, not for a weekend away. For good. There was no eye contact. No explanation. Just the rhythmic folding of shirts and a duffel bag stretching at its seams. My voice barely made it out of my throat. Jeremy, what are you doing? He didn't look up. What I should have done a long time ago. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. Not yet. 23 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. Not with a fight, not with an apology, but with a man treating me like a stranger in my own bedroom. I reached out to touch his arm. He pulled away like I was fire. "Don't, Rachel," he muttered. "I've made up my mind." I demanded answers. I asked if there was someone else. He hesitated only a second, then said, "This isn't about anyone else. I just need to breathe." But I knew that look. The guilt buried behind indifference. The secrets that had been mounting for months. The late nights, the locked phone, the smiles that never reached his eyes. Then came the final blow. "I'll be needing my half of the savings. Transfer it to my account." That was when the panic hit me like a truck. The college fund, our daughter Lily's fund, the one we'd built dollar by dollar for 12 years. I rushed down the stairs, not caring that my robe was slipping or that my hands were shaking. I opened my laptop on the kitchen counter, fingers trembling on the keys. Lily, just 12 years old, was eating breakfast quietly. "Mom," she asked, "why are you shaking?" "It's nothing, sweetheart," I lied throat tight. "Dad's just going away for a little bit." I logged into our accounts. The screen loaded. My vision blurred. Our checking account $193.48. Our savings 0.0. Lily's college fund also 0. I refreshed the page 3 times. Nothing changed. The fund we'd saved for since the day Lily was born gone. $79,402. Gone. I checked the transaction history. 3 days ago, while I was leading a Sunday school group at church, Jeremy had emptied every account. The bank confirmed the transfers were legitimate. He'd had full access. There was nothing I could do. I stood there, mouth dry, heart shattered, staring at the screen like it might show a different truth if I looked long enough. Behind me, Lily's voice was soft. "Did he take my money too?" I turned slowly. She looked smaller than usual, sitting at the breakfast table, her spoon idle in her hand. Her long hair was braided the way I always did it. Her backpack was by the door, ready for middle school. I nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then she stood, rinsed her bowl in the sink, and dried it with a dish towel. She turned to me, her face unreadable. "Don't worry, Mom," she said calmly. "I handled it." At first I thought she was just trying to comfort me. But there was something in her tone. Not a child's hope, not blind optimism, something colder, sharper, like she knew something I didn't. If you've ever stood in the middle of your kitchen watching your life dissolve one digit at a time on a bank screen, if you've ever heard a 12-year-old whisper something that made your stomach twist, leave a like and come with me through this story, because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something I never expected, and neither did Jeremy. The rest of that morning passed in a kind of emotional fog. I remember the way the light filtered through the window blinds, dust floating in the air like ghosts. Lily had already gone to school, her parting words still echoing in my ears. I handled it. What did that even mean? I tried to convince myself she just meant emotionally, that she wasn't falling apart the way I was. But the calmness in her voice, it wasn't the calm of a child coping, it was the calm of someone with a plan. I sat on the living room couch for hours, still in my robe, Jeremy's departure looping in my mind like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Every moment of our marriage replayed, but in reverse. The laughter, the shared dinners, the bedtime stories with Lily between us, all felt hollow now, as if they'd only ever existed to serve a story he'd never truly believed in. At noon I snapped out of it. I had to do something. I called the bank again, confirmed every transaction. The funds had been moved to a private investment firm, a firm Jeremy's brother happened to work for. My stomach turned. This wasn't just betrayal. This was planned betrayal. That night, I barely touched my dinner. Lily, on the other hand, was methodical. She cleaned her plate, offered to wash the dishes, then disappeared into her room. I could hear the soft hum of her laptop through the wall. Not music, not video games, just consistent typing. Sharp and fast, purposeful. At 9:47 p.m., I knocked softly on her door. "Come in," she said, not looking up. I walked in with a cup of tea. Her desk was neatly arranged textbooks, highlighters, sticky notes. But her laptop screen was angled away from me, and when she noticed me trying to peek, she casually minimized the window. Too casually. "I made some chamomile," I offered. "Figured it might help you sleep." She smiled a little too sweetly and accepted the cup. "Thanks, Mom. What are you working on?" "History report, Industrial Revolution." "Need help?" "I'm good." I didn't push, but the unease inside me was growing like a vine curling tighter around my chest. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up and checking the hallway for light under her door. It stayed on until after midnight. Click, 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 the same steady rhythm. The next day I noticed something else. Lily had become precise, not just responsible but surgical in her behavior. She packed her lunch with almost military efficiency. She corrected me on an error in our utility bill. She even offered to go through our mailbox and sort what was junk and what might matter legally. It was as if someone had hit a switch in her. Or maybe I thought bitterly maybe it had always been there, this hidden brilliance, and I'd been too busy trusting a man who didn't deserve it to see it. That afternoon, I found myself calling my sister Dana. "Something's off with Lily," I said. "She's not upset, not even a little. It's like she's already moved on." Dana paused. "Maybe that's how she's coping. You remember how I got after Dad left? You punched a hole in the garage wall?" "Exactly. Some kids scream, some shut down, some get strategic." Strategic. That word landed hard. That evening I was folding laundry in Lily's room. She hates when I do that without asking, but I needed an excuse to be there when I saw it. A notebook half hidden beneath a hoodie, spiral bound, pages dog-eared. I knew it wasn't mine, and something about the way it was tucked under the fabric. It wasn't a school notebook. It was a secret. I hesitated, but then I opened it, and what I found inside stopped my breath. It wasn't notes for a history project. It wasn't doodles or song lyrics. It was data, names, dates, account numbers, passwords, flowcharts. It was a war plan. And Jeremy, he was the target. I heard Lily coming up the stairs and quickly closed the notebook, heart pounding. She stepped into the room holding an empty glass. She looked at me, looked at the bed, and then at the notebook. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said calmly. My mouth went dry. "Lily, what is all this?" She looked me straight in the eye. "It's justice." And for the first time I realized, maybe Jeremy hadn't just underestimated me. He'd underestimated her. I stared at her. This 12-year-old standing in front of me, barely up to my shoulder, arms crossed loosely over her t-shirt that still had a tiny ketchup stain on the hem from dinner. But there was nothing childish in her expression. It wasn't defiance or guilt. It was clarity. Justice, I echoed, still clutching the spiral-bound notebook like it might burn me. "Lily, you're 12. What exactly are you doing?" She walked past me and sat on the edge of her bed, pulling her legs up crisscross. "Dad stole from us, Mom, and he thought we'd just sit here crying while he ran off and played house with someone else. But that's not what we're going to do." I sat down too, not on the bed, but in the desk chair across from her. "What do you mean we—" She raised one eyebrow. "You said yourself we're in this together now." The air between us felt heavy. It wasn't fear I felt. Not exactly. It was awe. The kind of unease you get when you realize someone you thought you knew was capable of something far greater or far darker than you imagined. "You have account information," I said carefully. "How did you get it?" Lily reached under her mattress and pulled out a flash drive, then slid it into her laptop. She angled the screen toward me. "Dad reuses passwords," she said with a shrug. "Same one for everything: email, cloud, bank access, even his LinkedIn. He's not as clever as he thinks." What loaded on the screen made my mouth fall open. Hundreds of emails, scanned documents, screenshots of text messages between Jeremy and a woman named Michelle Quinn. Not Rebecca, a different mistress. Apparently, he had options. "This isn't just about us," Lily continued. "Dad's been running low-level scams for years, borrowing money from clients, creating fake consulting invoices. And guess what? Michelle works in his firm's compliance department." I shook my head, trying to process. "How do you even understand all this? You're in 7th grade. She gave me a sideways look. "The internet is free, Mom. Reddit, YouTube, GitHub. People explain everything if you're willing to pay attention. I started learning last summer." After I saw how often you cried alone in the laundry room, that sentence hit me harder than any of the spreadsheets. All this time I thought I was hiding my pain. Turns out I wasn't hiding anything. Lily had been watching and learning. You shouldn't have had to do this, I whispered. This isn't your responsibility. It is when no one else steps up, she said flatly. Dad didn't just take our money, he took our security, our future. That kind of betrayal doesn't get to go unpunished. I was silent for a long time. Then I finally asked the question that had been sitting in my throat since that first morning when she said she'd handled it. What exactly have you done? Lily pulled up a folder labeled Damage Control. Inside were subfolders, anonymous tips, credit freeze reports, asset watch list, and one labeled simply Michelle Q. I've reported Dad's transactions to the IRS, she said, tapping the mouse. Used burner emails and Tor to submit tips. Sent his firm's internal audit team copies of falsified expense reports. And as for Michelle, I may or may not have sent her fiancé a neatly packaged collection of screenshots. I gasped. Her fiancé? Lily gave a small, satisfied smile. People who lie together rarely stay loyal when the fallout begins. My heart pounded. Lily, this could ruin people's lives. She looked me dead in the eye, so could what Dad did. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her to slow down, to let the adults handle this. But who was I kidding? The adults had already failed. I had failed. She stood and closed the laptop gently, then handed me the flash drive. I backed up everything here, just in case. If anything happens to me, don't say that I cut in. She nodded. Okay, but just know, this isn't over. He doesn't get to walk away, not without consequences. I sat in her room for a while after she left. I listened to her walk down the hall, pour herself a glass of water like any other kid, and flip on the TV. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt something else, the sinking realization that this wasn't a child reacting to pain. This was a strategist executing a plan. And I didn't know where the line was anymore between justice and vengeance. But I did know this. My daughter wasn't afraid of monsters. She had learned to become something even monsters would fear. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The house was still. Too still. I walked past Lily's room and peeked through the barely cracked door. She was already dressed, sitting at her desk, writing in that same spiral-bound notebook. The blue glow from her laptop cast long shadows across her cheeks. She looked like a child and nothing like one. I made coffee and tried to push down the mix of dread and admiration crawling up my spine. I had spent most of the night lying awake, turning over every file I had read, every confession she had made. And the one thing I couldn't shake was this: if a grown man like Jeremy was careless enough to underestimate Lily, how many others had already lost before they realized it? At breakfast, Lily sat across from me, carefully arranging her toast slices like puzzle pieces. I watched her for a long moment. Lily, I said finally, what's the next step? She didn't hesitate. We wait. For what? For them to panic. Those words chilled me. That afternoon, while she was at school, I dug deeper into the flash drive she'd given me. The files weren't just organized, they were strategically sorted by target, by type of fraud, by level of risk. I found an audio recording labeled 9 p.m. Call Michelle. I clicked play. Jeremy's voice low and desperate. If it goes public, I'm done. I need more time. Michelle's response. Your daughter's just a kid. She doesn't have anything real. Jeremy, she's got enough to ruin me. I hit stop, my hands trembling. My daughter wasn't bluffing. At 3:27 p.m., I received an email notification from the school board. Jeremy had attempted to access Lily's academic records online. Unauthorized attempt. Blocked. Logged. I called the school immediately. They confirmed everything and had already flagged the incident. The administrator asked if we needed to involve legal counsel. My voice cracked when I said, maybe. When Lily got home, I told her, I figured he'd try, she said coolly, tossing her backpack down. He's looking for leverage. You're 12, I whispered. You shouldn't know how to use words like leverage. She looked at me not unkindly, but I do. That evening, I made her favorite mac and cheese with garlic bread, and we ate on the couch like we used to during movie nights. For a moment, she giggled at something on TV, and I saw my little girl again. The one who used to beg to wear fairy wings to the grocery store. But when I asked if she wanted dessert, she shook her head. I have work to do. And just like that, the moment disappeared. I followed her back to her room, this time not trying to be sneaky about it. She sighed, but didn't stop me when I sat beside her. Lily, I said, what if I asked you to stop? She didn't look up from her keyboard. Why? Because it's not your job to fix what he broke. It's mine. I'm the parent. She paused. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then dropped to her lap. He didn't just betray you, Mom, she said softly. He betrayed me. He looked me in the eye and said we were a team. He tucked me in at night knowing he was draining my future. He used my name, my identity. I know, I whispered. No, you don't, her voice hardened. Because if you did, you wouldn't try to stop me. You'd help me. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. Then help me understand, I said, please. Lily turned her laptop toward me. She opened a new file labeled Phase 2. Inside were screenshots of financial transfers. One large transaction stood out. A payment to a real estate agent in Arizona. Another to a private school registration office under a false identity. Fake IDs. Forged leases. Jeremy wasn't just running, he was restarting. He's building a new life, Lily said. New city, new identity. Using money he stole in my name. I couldn't believe it, or maybe I didn't want to. He's not done with us, she continued. He'll leave us with his debt, his mess, and blame us for not being stronger. I nodded slowly. Then we don't just stop him, I said. We burn the blueprint. She looked at me. For the first time in days, her face softened. You mean that? I do. Because something in me had shifted. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about protection. And my daughter was teaching me how to fight for it. The next day, we became a team. Not a mother and daughter bound by bedtime routines and school lunches, but something sharper. 2 women, one young, one broken, both determined. It was Lily who handed me a folder that morning labeled simply, Survival. Inside were 3 printouts, a timeline of Jeremy's financial movements, a checklist of legal steps I needed to take, and a pre-filled petition to freeze all joint assets pending divorce. I stared at her handwriting, clear-focused, underlined in red where it mattered. Lily, I said quietly, you shouldn't be the one holding this weight. She looked at me across the breakfast table, toast untouched. If I don't, who will? And I didn't have an answer. By noon, I was sitting in the small, worn-down office of a legal aid center downtown. The woman behind the desk looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. I handed her Lily's packet. She raised an eyebrow. Who prepared all this? I hesitated, then said my daughter. The woman blinked. How old? 12. She scanned the documents and let out a low whistle. She missed her calling. Or maybe she just found it early. That night, something changed in the air. The tension that had clung to the walls like mold began to lift. Lily didn't seem lighter, no, she was still methodical, still watchful, but I saw something else in her relief. As if finally someone was standing beside her instead of behind her. We began working together at night. I'd sift through bank statements and she'd teach me how to check for metadata in PDFs. I'd write letters to creditors and she'd proof them, suggesting where I needed to sound firmer. One night I asked, when did you start planning all this? She didn't look up from her screen. The night I heard him whispering in the garage. I knew it wasn't business. He was scared, real scared. That's when I knew whatever he was doing, it was bigger than just leaving. Why didn't you tell me? Because you still loved him. Her answer cut deep, not out of cruelty, but truth. I sat back in my chair staring at her, this girl with ponytailed hair, fuzzy socks, and the cold clarity of a seasoned investigator. My child had become a shield while I was curled up in shame. That Friday, a letter came in the mail addressed to Lily M. McAllister. It was a collections notice. Apparently she owed $218,000 for a defaulted real estate loan. I stood frozen in the hallway, the envelope crumpling in my hand. Lily walked up behind me, took the paper, scanned it, then calmly folded it in half. Time to escalate, she said. I didn't even ask what that meant. We sat down together. She opened a folder called Countermeasures. I watched her submit an FTC identity theft affidavit, draft a police report, and file 3 credit disputes all in under 15 minutes. This won't erase the trauma, I said softly, but it might help close the door. She nodded. Doors are meant to be locked once you know what's behind them. At that moment, I realized we had both crossed a threshold, one where innocence wasn't just lost. It had been traded in for armor. And at the heart of it all was the same truth: we didn't get justice because we were lucky. We got justice because we built it ourselves. If you've ever had to pick up the broken pieces someone else left behind, if you've ever had to become stronger than the person who hurt you, then maybe like us, you know the quiet fire it takes just to keep going. And if you've ever had to grow up too fast just to protect what's yours, share your story in the comments, because someone out there might need to know they're not alone. The more I saw of Lily's strategy, the more I realized she wasn't just reacting. She had a blueprint, a sequence, a precision that belonged more in a courtroom or a corporate boardroom than in a middle school bedroom decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars. That weekend, while she was at a friend's sleepover, her first break in weeks, I allowed myself to search her laptop. I know how that sounds. I'm her mother, not her spy. But I wasn't searching out of mistrust. I was searching because I needed to understand what she'd already seen. In a folder labeled Recovered Intel, I found screenshots of encrypted group chats between Jeremy and two other men. One of them, I recognized a former coworker of his who'd been fired for financial misconduct years ago. Another name I didn't know, but the messages made one thing clear: this wasn't some romantic escape plan with a mistress. Jeremy had been part of a multi-layered fraud ring: identity theft, real estate scams, shell companies. He'd stolen more than our family's savings. He'd built an empire on lies and burned every bridge on his way out. One message chilled me. If it goes south, I'll pin it on Rachel. Her name's still on the accounts. She won't even see it coming. He had planned to leave me not just broken, but ruined. I closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen, hands shaking. For weeks, I had felt guilty, ashamed, even like maybe I'd failed him as a wife. But now, I saw the truth. Jeremy didn't leave out of confusion or loneliness. He left with intention, with calculation, and my daughter had figured it out before I ever saw it coming. The next evening, Lily returned, her overnight bag bouncing against her legs. How was it, I asked, trying to sound casual? Fun, she said. We watched old Disney movies, ate too much popcorn. She said it with a smirk. That classic teenage edge that still reminded me she was a child. For a moment, I let myself believe maybe she'd stepped back from the edge. Maybe we could reclaim something normal. But later that night, she handed me a single page. I've been tracking his burner phone locations through metadata, she said. He's in Albuquerque now, probably laying low while the heat builds. But I think I can push him out of hiding. I stared at her. Lily, how far are you planning to go? As far as I need to. There was no hesitation, no apology, only resolve. She showed me a draft of an anonymous email to Jeremy's former clients warning them of fraudulent filings under their names, accompanied, of course, by the evidence to back it up. The goal wasn't to destroy him. It was to make sure he couldn't hide. He still thinks we're the quiet ones, Lily said. The family that won't fight back. That's his biggest mistake. I felt something swell in my chest. Not just pride, something deeper. A kind of rebirth. Like I was no longer just surviving what he did to us. I was finally stepping into the truth. That night, as Lily worked at her desk, I sat beside her, not as the mother who needed to protect her daughter, but as the woman who had been saved by her daughter's protection. You know, I said quietly, I used to think being strong meant keeping things together. Lily paused her typing and looked at me. It doesn't? No, I said. It means knowing when to let it all fall apart and rebuild it stronger. She smiled a little. That's what we're doing. I nodded. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. She turned back to her screen, fingers flying again. And I realized something then, something that stuck with me like a quiet echo. Jeremy had taught us how to hide. But Lily was teaching me how to fight. If you've ever had to dig your way out of someone else's destruction, if you've ever watched your child become the one holding the line, tell me, have you ever been underestimated until the day you weren't? Monday afternoon came with a phone call that changed everything. I was loading groceries into the fridge when my cell buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail until I saw the area code. New Mexico. My hands froze on a carton of eggs. I picked up the call slowly, the kind of slow that comes when you sense your world is about to tilt again. Mrs. McAllister, a male voice asked. Yes. This is Agent Rowe with the Financial Crimes Division at the Department of Justice. I'm calling about a report submitted under your name last week regarding a Jeremy McAllister. My stomach dropped. I hadn't submitted anything yet, but I knew exactly who had. Yes, I'm aware of the situation. He was calm, professional, but I could hear a tightness in his tone. The information you provided led us to open a preliminary investigation. We've already frozen multiple accounts and several clients connected to Mr. McAllister's firm have stepped forward. I closed the fridge slowly, heart racing. Clients? There are allegations of forged investment returns, identity misuse, and one case involving a fake death certificate submitted to collect early insurance. I didn't even know what to say. Death certificate. Yes, ma'am. A woman in Texas. Her name was on one of the forged loan applications filed as deceased, but she's very much alive. He paused. Whoever compiled this information did an extraordinary job. May I ask how you obtained it? I cleared my throat. Let's just say, my daughter's very observant. There was a moment of silence on his end. Then, with a note of respect, I'd keep her close, ma'am. She's sharper than most of my team. That night, I watched Lily eat dinner like it was any other Tuesday. Spaghetti, garlic bread. She sprinkled parmesan with military precision. I waited until she pushed her plate aside before speaking. The DOJ called today. She didn't look up. I figured they would. They're opening a case. It's official. Lily finally met my eyes. Good. He needs to know he's not untouchable. I nodded quiet. But that's not the best part, she added, reaching into her backpack. She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. I opened it. Inside were 30 printouts of social media comments and direct messages, people sharing stories. Stories of stolen retirement funds, manipulated signatures, bank loans opened in their children's names. One was from a man in Kentucky who wrote, "Whoever sent the tip saved my family. My mother would have lost everything." I looked up at Lily, throat tight. You started something bigger than us. I didn't mean to, she admitted. But once people started talking, I couldn't stop reading. I realized what happened to us wasn't rare. It was just hidden. We were quiet for a moment. Do you feel better? I asked. She considered it. Not better. Just like I took the wheel. That night we sat on the couch watching a movie, some old 90s rom-com we barely followed. Halfway through, Lily turned to me and said, "He thought we'd just sit in the wreckage and cry, didn't he?" "Yeah," I whispered. "He did." "Well," she said, pulling the blanket over her knees, "he was wrong." And it was in that moment I realized something deeper than anger. Something more lasting than revenge. Jeremy hadn't just underestimated Lily's intelligence. He'd underestimated her humanity. While he schemed to build a life on stolen names and buried debt, she was building something else, a network of truth, of people, of healing. She wasn't just fighting for us anymore. She was fighting for them. If you've ever had to turn your pain into a map for someone else to follow, if you've ever had to lead others out of a darkness they didn't ask for, tell me, what did you build from the wreckage and who did it help? Because somewhere out there, someone might be scrolling, wondering if they're the only one. And maybe, just maybe, your story is the one that keeps them standing. If you've made it this far and this resonates even a little, don't forget to like, comment your experience, or subscribe for more stories that remind us we're not alone. By the end of that week, Jeremy's world was beginning to fracture, and he didn't even know Lily's fingerprints were on the cracks. The first sign came through a news article, a quiet headline buried beneath a pile of finance pieces: "Regional wealth firm suspends executive amid internal fraud investigation." The name wasn't Jeremy's, it was one of his closest partners. But Lily circled 3 sentences in red and slid the paper across the table to me during breakfast. "He's next," she said simply. I sipped my coffee, trying to stay calm. "You think he'll run?" Lily shook her head. "He already did. This just makes it official." That night, Jeremy called. I didn't expect it. His name popped up like a ghost in my caller ID, and I froze for a second. Then I answered. "Rachel," he started, his voice worn down thin with tension. "I need to ask you something. Honestly." "I'm listening," I replied coldly. Did you give someone access to my accounts?" I didn't respond. "There's a leak," he went on, breathing fast. "My clients are pulling out. My firm is threatening to audit me. Michelle won't answer my calls. And someone posted screenshots of my texts with her on a finance subreddit." I almost laughed at that. He was crumbling under the pressure, and we hadn't even hit the deepest layers yet. "You think I'd be that clever?" I asked. Jeremy hesitated. "It's not you, is it?" I stayed silent. "Then who—" At that exact moment, Lily walked into the room, poured herself a glass of water, and gave me the smallest, most calculated nod. "Look," he said, desperation rising. "I know I made mistakes, but this is sabotage. It's criminal. Whoever's doing this, they're watching me." I bit my lip to keep from saying what I wanted to. "Yes, they are, and they're 12. Instead, I asked, "Are you afraid?" He scoffed. "What kind of question is that?" "Because you should be," I said. "And not because someone's watching you, but because you don't even understand the damage you've caused to your daughter, to me, to people who trusted you." Silence on the other end. Then a brittle voice. "Rachel, I never meant to hurt Lily. You stole her name. I was going to fix it, pay it back." "By what? Gaslighting us into silence? Walking away like you never had a child?" I panicked. "No, Jeremy," I said. "You planned. And now you're being outmaneuvered by the one person you never thought would fight back." Before he could respond, I ended the call. Lily looked at me. "Was that him?" I nodded. "What did he say?" "That someone's sabotaging him. That he's scared." She blinked, slow and deliberate. "Good." But then something unexpected happened. She sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. For the first time since this all began, Lily looked tired. Not just physically, but emotionally hollowed out. The armor she'd worn so well-measured sarcasm, technical brilliance, icy detachment suddenly cracked. "I hate that he made me like this," she whispered. "That I had to become someone who watches their own father burn and doesn't flinch." I reached for her hand. "You became who you needed to be, Lily. Not because of him, but in spite of him." She didn't cry, but the silence that followed said everything. We sat there, just the two of us, in a kitchen that used to be filled with laughter and trust. Now it held something else, truth heavy and undeniable. Jeremy had set the fire. Lily was just the one who learned how to walk through it. And me, I was finally learning how to stand beside her. If you've ever had to choose between staying silent or standing up, if you've ever watched someone you love shatter and rebuild from the ashes, tell me, what did it cost you to become unbreakable? Because sometimes survival looks like silence. And sometimes it looks like a 12-year-old girl holding the match. 3 days later, everything exploded. It started with a series of voicemails. Jeremy left 5 in total, each one more frantic than the last. The first was calm, almost pleading. "Rachel, please, let's talk before this gets worse." By the 5th, his voice cracked from rage and fear. "Whoever's doing this is going to jail. I swear this isn't over." But it was, and he was the last one to realize it. That evening, Lily came home from school unusually quiet. She didn't head straight to her room like she usually did. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and stood beside me at the sink, staring at the window like she was watching the horizon for something. "What is it?" I asked, drying my hands on a towel. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, without looking at me, she said, "They served him." I froze. "Who?" "Federal investigators. At his office. Someone filmed it." She pulled out her phone and played the clip. It was blurry, clearly shot from a hallway corner, but I could see Jeremy, his suit crumpled, his face pale, as 2 agents stepped into view. There were murmurs, shocked co-workers, and then handcuffs. I covered my mouth, breath caught between disbelief and something darker, satisfaction. Lily didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just tapped the screen to pause it. "They're charging him with multiple counts: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. His firm is disavowing everything. He's done." And then she sat at the kitchen table like she'd just finished homework. "You don't seem relieved," I said gently. She gave a short laugh. "I'm not sure what I am. It's like I reached the end of a video game I didn't want to play." That hit me harder than I expected. My daughter had been living in war mode, and now that the enemy was neutralized, she didn't know what peace was supposed to feel like. I sat beside her. "You didn't deserve any of this. You should have been worried about school dances and science fairs, not court cases and credit freezes." "Yeah," she said, picking at a fray in her sleeve. "But if I hadn't stepped in, he would have erased us, Mom. He would have disappeared, left you drowning in debt, and I'd have no name, no future, nothing." I reached for her hand. She let me take it. "But you stopped him," I whispered. She nodded slowly. "I just don't know who I'm supposed to be now." We sat in silence, the kind that settles not from discomfort, but from shared exhaustion. Then she turned to me and asked a question I didn't expect. "Do you think he ever loved me? Like, really loved me?" My heart cracked in places I thought had already been broken. "I think he loved the idea of being a father," I said carefully. "He loved how it looked, the pictures, the public praise. But when it came time to choose between doing right by you or doing what served him, he made his choice." She took a deep breath, and for a moment she looked every bit her age. "Then I guess I made mine too," she said. Later that night, she showed me a folder on her computer labeled "Closure." It wasn't more evidence or data trails. It was a letter, a single document, addressed to Jeremy. It wasn't angry, it wasn't cruel. It was measured, thoughtful, and devastatingly honest. A farewell from daughter to father, not seeking answers, just declaring boundaries. I read the final lines twice. "You didn't just lose your money. You lost the version of me that would have waited by the window for you to come back. I'm not waiting anymore." I looked at her. "Are you going to send it?" "No," she said, shutting the laptop. "He'll never understand. But I needed to write it. For me." I nodded. "That's enough." And it was. Because this wasn't about Jeremy anymore. This was about the girl who reclaimed her future and did it on her own terms. If you've ever had to heal from something you never caused, if you've ever learned to live without an apology, drop a comment below. Share the moment you chose yourself over the person who hurt you. 'Cause sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. The morning the verdict came in, I was folding laundry. It sounds mundane, anticlimactic even, but maybe that's what healing looks like. Not fireworks or dramatic music. Just clean clothes, a quiet room, and finally no fear vibrating in my chest. Lily was upstairs in her room. She hadn't said much since turning in that letter she never planned to send. I think she had poured everything she needed to say into those lines, and the rest, her peace, her future, would be built in silence. The phone buzzed. A notification from a local news app: breaking financial executive Jeremy Dorsey pleads guilty to federal charges, sentenced to 11 years without parole. I read the headline twice, as if expecting it to morph into something softer. But no, 11 years, no parole. I walked upstairs, gently knocked on Lily's door, and pushed it open. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, sketching in a notebook. Her expression didn't change when she looked up, like she already knew what I was about to say. "It's done," I said softly. "He pled guilty." She paused, pencil frozen mid-stroke. "Did he say anything in court?" I shook my head, not a word, just looked down the whole time. A beat of silence. Then Lily set the notebook down and said, "Can we go somewhere?" "Where?" She shrugged. "Anywhere, somewhere normal." So we did. We went to a local diner, our old spot, the one we used to go to every other Sunday, before life turned into courtroom transcripts and bank records. The waitress even remembered our order. Pancakes for her, black coffee and eggs for me. We ate mostly in silence, the kind that doesn't need to fill space. Then Lily glanced out the window and whispered, "Do you think people like him know the damage they do?" I thought for a moment. I think people like him convince themselves it's not that bad, that somehow the people around them will just absorb it, survive it. She nodded slowly. "But we didn't just survive it, did we?" I looked her in the eye. "No, we outlived it." She cracked, the smallest smile, one corner of her mouth turning up. And that was everything. Midway through breakfast, a woman at the next table leaned over and said, "Sorry, are you Rachel Dorsey?" I hesitated, then nodded. She smiled warmly. "I just wanted to say, I saw the story. You're braver than most people I know." I forced a small smile, thanked her, and watched her walk away. Then I turned to Lily. "Do you want to change our last name?" She blinked. "Can we?" "Absolutely. We can be whoever we want to be now." And just like that, we decided, from that day forward, we weren't Dorseys anymore. We weren't tethered to the fraud, the betrayal, the mess he left behind. We were free. As we walked out of the diner, Lily slipped her hand into mine like she used to when she was little. Not because she needed protection, but maybe just to say I'm here. If you've ever taken back your name, your story, your peace, if you've ever stood at the edge of what was done to you and said it ends here, don't just watch this in silence. Drop a comment. Say, "I took it back." Say, "I'm free." 'Cause somewhere someone needs to hear that healing is real. And sometimes it starts with pancakes and a new last name. Oh, and if this story stirred something in you, maybe a truth you've kept buried, don't let it stay hidden. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and join us in sharing what survival really looks like. We're writing new stories now, ones they don't get to steal. It had been 2 months since the verdict. 2 months since Jeremy Dorsey became a name associated with courtrooms, not family dinners. 2 months since Lily and I reclaimed something neither of us realized we had lost completely: our identity. And yet there was one more door we hadn't opened. Grandpa's old house sat about an hour outside of town. A modest ranch with creaky floorboards and ivy curling up the back fence. It had been in our family for decades, passed down quietly through generations until Jeremy tried to sell it behind my back. I'd blocked the transfer just in time, using a power of attorney Jeremy never expected me to find. But I hadn't returned since. Now Lily and I stood on the porch. The key was cold in my hand, the lock a little stiff. When the door opened, a wave of air hit us, old wood dust and something else. Memory. We stepped inside. Everything was just as we'd left it the last summer. Grandpa was still around. The faded green couch, the ceramic birds on the mantel, the photograph of me as a child sitting beside Grandpa in the garden, both of us smiling like we didn't know the future would twist so much. Lily walked into the kitchen, running her fingers along the countertop. It's like time just stopped. It always does, I said, until someone comes back to start it again. We spent the day cleaning, not with urgency, but with reverence. Each room held echoes of laughter, of simpler moments, of a version of family that had been real once, before ambition, before lies. In the attic, I found a locked box. It took us 20 minutes to crack it open, and what we found inside brought me to tears. Letters. Dozens of them, written in Grandpa's handwriting, some to my mom, some to me. Most were unsent, half-finished thoughts folded into envelopes that had never known stamps. One, though, had my name on it, sealed. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. Rachel. If you're reading this, then life brought you back here. I always hoped it would. You've always had more strength than you know, more fire than you've ever let the world see. Don't let anyone take that from you. Not a man, not a system, not even your own fear. And if this house ends up in your hands, don't sell it. Fill it with stories, with music, with people who choose kindness over appearances. You deserved more than what you got. But maybe now you'll build it with your own hands. Love always, Grandpa. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears spilling freely. Lily sat beside me, silent, reading over my shoulder. When I looked over, she was crying too. He knew, she whispered. He always knew. We stayed in that attic until the sun went down, talking about everything and nothing. About the past we came from and the future we still had to write. And for the first time, we weren't afraid of what came next. That night, we slept on sleeping bags in the living room, the fireplace crackling low. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, ours, sacred. I want to keep it, Lily said just before drifting off. We will, I promised. Because we weren't just survivors anymore. We were architects of our future, brick by brick, breath by breath. If you've ever found a place that felt like home after losing everything, drop a comment and share it. Tell us where your healing began. And if you believe every woman deserves to rewrite her legacy, to walk into spaces that once held pain and reclaim them with power, then stay with us. We're building more than stories here. Hit that like, leave your story, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this channel isn't just about revenge, it's about rising. A week after we reopened Grandpa's house, Lily brought home a letter. It wasn't from school, it wasn't from court, it wasn't even addressed to me. It was from Michelle. Yes, that Michelle. The woman Jeremy had built a second life with. The woman who once sent me a Christmas card signed, "With love from all of us," as if she didn't know she was erasing me. Lily found the envelope in our apartment mailbox, handwritten in slanted cursive. She handed it to me without a word, her expression unreadable, detached. I hesitated for a long time before opening it. Rachel, I know I have no right to write you. I debated for days whether or not to send this, but I'm doing it anyway, because what happened to Jeremy affected more people than I think you realize, including my daughter. She doesn't understand why her father's gone. She asks questions I can't answer. I thought he was someone else. I truly did. I'm sorry for the role I played, intentional or not. I know what I did when I stood beside him at court. When I smiled and played wife, I made you invisible. I made your daughter invisible. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if this letter will reach you, but I needed to tell you that I'm not asking for anything, except maybe your silence. Please don't come after me. Don't bring Lily into this anymore. Let what's broken stay buried. Michelle, I stared at the last line for a long time. Let what's broken stay buried. The nerve. I looked at Lily, who had quietly taken a seat across from me. She was watching me carefully, as if studying how I'd react. Not afraid, just observant. She's scared, I said finally. Lily didn't respond. She thinks we're going to come for her now. Like we're monsters she helped create and can't control. I mean, Lily said dryly, we did expose her fiancé, blow up her image, and remind the world that she was complicit in tax fraud. I couldn't help it, I laughed. It was short, sharp, and a little bitter. But then Lily leaned forward. We're done with her, right? I nodded. Yes, we are. Because revenge has a shelf life. And we had reached ours. That letter was never about healing. It was about fear. Michelle was scared her secrets would be next. That we'd burn down her life like Jeremy's. But what she didn't understand was this. We weren't here to destroy anymore. We were building. Later that night, I burned the letter in Grandpa's fireplace. Lily watched without comment, the flames dancing in her eyes. We didn't need closure from Michelle. We didn't need anything from her. What we needed, we already had truth, freedom, and each other. The next morning, we drove into town and signed the final paperwork to restore the house under our new last name, Hartley. A name chosen by Lily. It means brave, she had said. And that was enough. As we stepped out of the clerk's office, I looked over at her and said, "You know, this doesn't fix everything, right?" "I know," she replied, "but it's a damn good start." And it was. Because some stories don't need a perfect ending. They just need a chapter where the villains go quiet and the survivors speak louder than ever before. If you've ever received a letter that tried to silence your truth, let us know. Tell us what you did with it. Burned it. Framed it. Sent one back. Your story matters. If this hit close to home, go ahead, subscribe, drop your story in the comments, and help someone else feel a little less alone. because silence doesn't heal wounds. But speaking your truth, that can change everything. The headlines faded. The gossip dried up. People moved on as they always do. But healing isn't newsworthy. It doesn't trend. It doesn't show up in bold fonts with dramatic photos. It happens in quiet mornings, second chances, and learning to breathe without bracing for impact. It happened the day Lily came home from school with a flyer in her hand. "I want to join this," she said, holding it out to me. It was a local mentorship program, high school students helping middle school kids navigate difficult home situations. Divorce, grief, neglect. The things people pretend don't leave marks. "You sure?" I asked gently. She nodded. "I don't want them to feel like I did." That night after she went to bed, I sat on the porch with a glass of water and stared out into the dark woods behind Grandpa's house. No noise, no headlines, just stars. And I thought about all the things I almost became. I almost became bitter. I almost became invisible. I almost let someone else write the ending to my story. But I didn't, and neither did Lily. We weren't just recovering, we were rebuilding. Brick by honest brick. No shortcuts, no lies. 1 week later, I got a call from a local college. A professor had read our court statements, some of which had been made public, and invited me to speak to his social work students. At first I hesitated. What would I even say? I asked Lily. She shrugged. "Tell the truth. Most people don't get to hear it." So I went. I stood in a small classroom, fluorescent lights humming above, and told 20 wide-eyed students the truth. Not just about Jeremy, but about survival. About waking up in a home that doesn't feel like yours, walking on eggshells so long you forget what carpet feels like. About the courage it takes not to forgive, but to keep living without pretending it didn't happen. They didn't clap when I finished. They sat in silence. Heavy, respectful silence. Then one girl raised her hand and whispered, "How do you know it's over?" I smiled. "You don't, but eventually it stops defining you, and that's when you know you've won." I walked out of that classroom lighter. It wasn't fame, it wasn't revenge. It was legacy, the kind built from ashes, not applause. A few days later, Lily framed Grandpa's letter, hung it in the living room. Below it, she put a small wooden sign she carved in shop class. It said this house was saved by women who refused to disappear. I cried when I saw it. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time I believed her. If you've ever used your pain to help someone else rise, drop a comment. Let others see your fire. Let someone know they're not alone. And if this story helped you breathe a little easier today, stay with us. Click subscribe, share your story, and let's build something that outlives the hurt. Because the best revenge isn't fire or fury, it's a life well rebuilt. One morning in late September, I woke up to the sound of laughter, real unfiltered laughter. It was coming from the kitchen. Lily was cooking pancakes badly. There was batter on the stove, flour on the floor, and she was humming some pop song off-key. It was the most beautiful mess I'd ever seen. I just stood in the hallway and watched her. For a moment, it was like none of it had happened. No betrayal, no lawsuits, no stolen identity or ruined credit. Just a mom, a daughter, a house full of warmth. But we both knew the past didn't disappear. It was part of us now. Like an old scar, it didn't hurt anymore, but it reminded you to never forget. Later that day, we took a drive, not to escape, but to explore. There was a piece of land Grandpa used to own, 25 acres of forest along the river, left untouched since his passing. Jeremy had tried to sell it. I had stopped the paperwork just in time. Now we walked it ourselves. The trees still whispered. The water still shimmered. Lily turned to me. "What if we did something with this?" "Like what?" "A retreat," she said. "For women. For moms and daughters. For people like us." I stared at her. She was serious. "We could build something here," she continued. "Cabins, trails, places to just breathe. People don't need therapy all the time. Sometimes they just need a place that doesn't judge them." I laughed softly. "You want to build a sanctuary?" She nodded. "I want to build a future." That night, we stayed up sketching plans on napkins, talking about funding community grants, the name. She wanted to call it the Hartley Grove. After us. After the name we chose, not the one given to us by men who betrayed us. It was ambitious, crazy even. But for the first time, ambition didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. The following week, we spoke to a local nonprofit that helped women launch community initiatives. I was honest, this wasn't about profit, it was about healing. They listened, they believed. We weren't alone anymore. As we left the meeting, Lily grabbed my hand. "You think it's weird that all of this came from so much pain?" I looked at her. "No, I think it's exactly where strength comes from. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. You don't have to be whole to begin again. You can build while you're still bleeding. You can love while you're still learning. You can rise before you're ready. And sometimes what starts as revenge becomes redemption. If you've ever turned your darkest chapter into someone else's first step, tell us in the comments. Because someone out there is still lost in their story, waiting to hear how you made it through. And if this part of our journey stirred something in you, stay close. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're ready to turn your scars into blueprints. Let's stop surviving, let's start creating. Winter arrived early that year. The first snow blanketed the ground around Grandpa's house just after Thanksgiving. Everything was still quiet in a way that felt earned, peaceful, not empty. Lily stood by the window watching the flakes fall. She looked taller, older somehow, not in her height, but in the way she carried herself. There was a stillness in her now that wasn't there before. Not silence, strength. We had been through a war of names, debts, betrayals, and stolen truths. But we had come out the other side not as victims, but as architects. Architects of our own future. The legal battles were over. The news cycle had moved on. But we hadn't stopped building. The Hartley Grove was gaining attention in the community. We'd received a grant from the county, and a local construction company offered to donate reclaimed wood for our cabins. One of the first women to sign up was a nurse who'd lost custody of her child after her partner lied in court. Another was a young woman who fled a controlling household and had nowhere to go. They didn't come looking for pity. They came looking for air, and we gave them space to breathe. One night we held our first group circle around the fire pit Lily and I had built ourselves. No one needed to speak, but one by one they did. Stories came out, not cleanly, not perfectly, but they came. Raw, jagged truth like glass being laid down gently instead of thrown. I sat beside Lily wrapped in a wool blanket and whispered, "You know we did this." She nodded, and we're not done. No, we weren't. Because here's what no one tells you, healing is not an end, it's a revolution. Quiet, daily, unstoppable. You don't forget what was taken from you, but you build something no one can take again. At the closing of that first retreat weekend, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She said, "You saved me without even knowing me." I hugged her, and all I could whisper back was, "You saved yourself. We just lit a path." And in that moment, I realized the revenge story was never really about them. It was never about Jeremy, or Michelle, or courts and fraud and signatures forged in darkness. It was about reclaiming light, ours, and giving others the match. If you're listening to this now and you're still carrying the weight of what was done to you, please hear this. You are not broken beyond repair. Your story isn't over. You are still the author. You can burn the script they wrote for you and write something nobody expected. If our story moved something inside you, let that be your sign. Drop your story in the comments or simply write, "I'm still here." Because sometimes survival is the loudest declaration of victory. And if you believe in rising again even when no one claps for you, subscribe, like, and stay with us. This is more than a channel. It's a movement. It's a home for people who refuse to vanish quietly. Let's make sure the world remembers the ones they tried to erase are the ones who rebuilt everything. They thought we would stay silent. They thought the betrayal would break us, that their lies would bury our names, our legacy, our worth. But they forgot one thing. We are not made of silence. We are made of fire, of women who carry their scars like banners, of daughters who turn pain into purpose, of mothers who rise again and again, not for applause, but for truth. The story you just heard, it's not just mine. It's ours. It belongs to every person who's ever been told you're overreacting, who's had their trust shattered, and their identity stolen, not just on paper, but in spirit. It belongs to the girl who had no one show up for her, so she showed up for herself. To the woman who was gaslit, blamed, erased, and still stood back up and said no more. And to you, sitting there quietly, maybe hurting, maybe healing, maybe unsure if you'll ever feel whole again, you will, because healing is not a finish line. It's a decision you make every morning when you choose not to let their version of you define your future. So if this story gave you strength, even just a flicker, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, let it ripple. And if your heart is still heavy, come sit with us. This channel is for the brave, the broken, and the rebuilding. Like, comment, and subscribe, not just for me, but for you, for your story, for your voice. Because in a world that tried to silence us, the loudest thing we can do is keep telling the truth.